minus f of a over h. And below it, I just wrote two problems that are, you don't have to write these down, but I just want to iterate that you already know how to solve these. You know how to subtract 3 and divide by 2 to get x is 4. I get that. You know how to cube this to get 27x cubed y is 6. My point is this is no longer the math that we are doing, okay? That's the mathematics you embrace, that's fine, but we are way past that point. We must look at things that are more challenging. And so in this situation, we want to evaluate this function rule, and so I'm first going to set up k of a plus h. And I'll set up k of a. And so what that means is wherever I see an x, instead of that x, I want to put an a plus h in its place. So 2 over a plus h plus 3. And then, instead of an x for k of a, I write just 2 over a plus 3. We good? What does the rule tell me to do with those two things? I subtract them and I divide by h. So this is just to help organize what that thing is and what that thing is. I subtract them and I divide by h. So I have 2 over a plus h plus 3, and I will subtract 2 over a plus 3. And that all sits over h. This is a complex fraction. We've talked about complex fractions in your first unit. In order to simplify a complex fraction, I have to make one fraction in the top. And how will that happen? In order to subtract these fractions, I must have? Common denominators. Good. So I'll multiply top and bottom by a plus h plus 3. And the other side by a plus 3 over a plus 3. This is the part I'm probably most concerned about for you guys moving forward. There are a lot of people that made mistakes when it came to the fraction problems on their last test. We'll try to be careful with our fractions here. I'm going to distribute the 2 to both of these, and I get 2a plus 6. And then for the second part, I'm not going to distribute 2, but rather negative 2. Make sure you carry the negative with you, and I get a minus 2a, I get a minus 2h, and I get a minus 6. That all sits over the denominator of a plus 3 times a plus h plus 3. And that all sits over h over 1. Hopefully you recall from yesterday, if it doesn't have an h, it should cancel. Notice how the 2a and the negative 2a disappear. The 6 and the negative 6 disappear. And all I have left has an h. Remember, we multiplied by the reciprocal instead of dividing by h over 1. And notice that the h's in this situation will reduce as well. And so our answer is negative 2 over a plus 3 times a plus h plus 3. So you know you're done when everything that doesn't have an h cancels and you're able to divide the h out of the denominator. That will happen every time. All right, flip it over. Let's try 2 more. Okay, these two involve radicals. They're not that bad. Just a little trick. I'm going to write L of a plus h and L of a. So I plug in an a plus h and I get the square root of a plus h plus 5. If I plug in a, I get the square root of a plus 5. Very good. The rule tells me, I'll write it up here, f of a plus h minus f of a over h. So I'm going to subtract them. over h. And now here we are. I have to try to make sure that I get rid of these square root signs so I can access the h. Remember, everything that doesn't have an h we would like to cancel. But I can't just lift them off to get a minus a and 5 minus 5. That isn't going to work. Do you remember a technique we used in the very first unit for how we get rid of square roots in this situation? And it's not by squaring. Anybody remember? First hour didn't remember either. Let me try to bring you back to this. Suppose we had 1 over 2 minus the root of 3. Multiply by the close. If we multiply by the square root of 3, you're right that it will get rid of that square root of 3, but it'll create one on the 2, won't it?
You multiply 2 plus square root of 3.
Good. We multiply by the conjugate, as it was called, 2 plus the root of 3. The word conjugate means to change the ending. Who are my Spanish people here right now? Nobody taking Spanish right now?
I was in it sophomore year.
Last year?
Yeah.
Gilly's taking it right now.
Sophomore year.
He's not a big fan. Okay, so 2 years ago.
Yeah.
So you, good memories, bad memories?
It depends.
Depends. Do you remember any of the verbs you learned in Spanish? Anybody know a verb in Spanish? Wow. How about hablo? I speak. Hablo, hables, hablamos, hablan. So we're conjugating it in that we're changing the ending. And so this conjugate simply just means we change the ending. Now, one last piece I'll show you to try to connect mathematically is this. If you have a plus b times a minus b, those are conjugates. And watch what happens when you multiply them out. You get a squared and you get a minus b squared, don't you? The middles disappear. So what's going to happen is this thing's going to get squared and it's going to subtract this thing getting squared. So the conjugate is a beautiful thing to try to manipulate these type of expressions. So let's do that. The conjugate will be the square root of a plus h plus 5. And instead of a minus, it'll be a plus square root of a plus 5. The conjugate, the changing of the ending. Since Spanish, and Kira got really excited all of a sudden. Big fan of Spanish, Kira? Okay. It's okay if you are. All right, so I'll walk it through slowly here as we multiply these out. As I multiply those two, the square root disappears, and I just get a plus h plus 5. What happens as I multiply these and these? This one's going to give me a positive. This one's going to be negative. And if you add the positive and the negative, they will cancel. So I don't need to worry about the middle. And as I multiply these two, I get just a plus 5. And it's negative due to my subtraction sign. So minus a plus 5. Question?
No.
Okay. On the bottom, we have h, and then we have all this stuff. Now, this is really kind of bulky. It doesn't look very pretty. Don't worry about it. Just let it come along for the ride. And now we carry out our top. Notice we said that if it doesn't have an h, it should cancel. And sure enough, a minus a goes away. And 5 minus 5 goes away. And you're left with h in the top, and the bottom, h times the square root of a plus h plus 5, plus the square root of a plus 5. The h's divide off, and we get 1 over the square root of a plus h plus 5 plus the square root of a plus 5. So every time if it doesn't have an h, it's going to go away. And every time if it the h will divide off. Okay. As we're missing a ton of people, I'm going to pick up the last problem tomorrow instead so that people have a chance to be here to see it. But we're going to stop.